The cold, sticky liquid drenched her hair, the cruel laughter of her classmates ringing in her ears as she collapsed onto the pavement. For 14-year-old Amelia, this was the moment her world shattered. She felt completely alone, but she had no idea that a silent protector was watching from the edge of the woods, about to step in and change her life forever. This is a story of how a broken spirit can be mended by the most loyal of friends. A journey we are so honored to share with you. Your support in liking and subscribing allows these powerful stories to be told. So, stay with us to see what happens when true courage appears in the form of a German Shepherd. The sky over Maple Creek, Oregon, was the color of a faded bruise, a heavy blanket of gray that promised a drizzle, but never committed. For 14-year-old Amelia, it was just the normal backdrop to another afternoon of quiet dread. The final bell at Maple Creek Middle School didn't signal freedom for her. It just started the clock on the most perilous part of her day. The walk from the classroom door to the relative safety of the street. Amelia clutched the straps of her worn backpack. Her worn blue hoodie pulled up, a shield that did little to make her invisible. She had a gentle face, framed by mousy brown hair that always seemed to escape its ponytail, and a pair of wide, hazel eyes that saw the world with the soul of an artist, but were often fixed on the ground to avoid unwanted attention. She almost made it. The edge of the schoolyard was in sight, a gateway to the quiet, tree-lined sidewalks of her neighborhood. But then a voice, sharp and syrupy sweet with malice, cut through the air. "Well, look what we have here. Little Miss Nobody trying to sneak away." Amelia froze, her heart sinking into the soles of her scuffed sneakers. She didn't need to turn around. She knew the voice belonged to Madison. Madison, with her bright blonde hair pulled into a perfect swinging ponytail, her posture ramrod straight in the school's signature yellow athletics jacket that she wore like a crown. She was the sun around which a small solar system of popularity revolved. And today, as always, her two main satellites, Chloe and Jessica, were flanking her, their faces set in identical smirks. Madison stepped in front of Amelia, blocking her path. She was holding a bottle of Coca-Cola, the red label, a vibrant slash of color against the dreary afternoon. "I was just so thirsty after practice," Madison said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "But you know, I think you look like you need a drink more than I do. You always look so drained." Chloe and Jessica giggled. A sound like scraping metal. A circle of other students began to form, some eager for the spectacle, others watching with a grim reluctance, but none daring to intervene. Amelia just stood there, her hands clenched into fists inside her hoodie pocket. She stared at a crack in the pavement, praying that if she didn't look up, this wouldn't be real. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue?" Madison taunted, unscrewing the cap. The fizzing sound was unnaturally loud in the sudden quiet. "Oh, that's right. You don't have any friends to talk to." And then it happened. Madison tipped the bottle, and the cold, sticky liquid cascaded over Amelia's head. It was a shocking, icy river that ran through her hair, down her face, and soaked into the front of her hoodie. The dark brown soda clung to her eyelashes and dripped from the tip of her nose. The collective gasp from the onlookers was followed by a wave of cruel laughter, led by Madison's triumphant cackle. The humiliation was a physical force, so powerful it buckled Amelia's knees. She collapsed onto the damp asphalt, the grit scraping against her palms. She didn't make a sound, but hot tears mixed with the sticky soda on her cheeks. The world blurred into a swirl of mocking faces and towering figures. It was over. Whatever small piece of herself she had managed to hold on to, It felt like it had just been washed away in a flood of sugary brown shame. But then, the laughter died. It didn't fade. It was cut off, as if a switch had been flipped. A new sound pierced the air, a low, guttural growl that vibrated with a power that had nothing to do with schoolyard politics. Amelia slowly lifted her head, swiping at her eyes. Emerging from the small patch of woods that bordered the school property was a dog. It was a German shepherd, large and majestic, his coat a classic tapestry of black and tan. He looked old, with a touch of gray frosting his noble muzzle, and he carried himself not with the frantic energy of a stray, but with the calm, deliberate confidence of a retired king. His intelligent brown eyes weren't fixed on the crowd. They were locked directly on Madison. He took a slow step forward, then another, his paws making no sound on the pavement. He didn't bark, he didn't snarl aggressively, but his lips were curled just enough to reveal a sliver of white teeth. His entire posture, from his pinned back ears to the rigid line of his spine, screamed a single, unambiguous message: enough. "What the heck is that?" Chloe whispered, taking a step back. Madison, for the first time, looked uncertain. Her bravado faltered in the face of this silent, imposing creature. The dog took another deliberate step, placing himself directly between the kneeling, sobbing girl and her tormentor. He sat down, a sentinel of fur and quiet fury, his gaze never leaving Madison. "Let's just go," Jessica mumbled, tugging on Madison's sleeve. "It's probably rabbit or something." Scrambling for the last word, Madison scoffed, "Whatever, it's a stupid, flea-bitten mutt." But her voice lacked its usual conviction. She turned, and with her cronies in tow, hurried away, the crowd of students melting away with them. Within seconds, the schoolyard was empty. There was only the gray sky, the damp ground, and Amelia, soaked and shivering. And in front of her, the silent guardian who had appeared from nowhere, his deep brown eyes now softened as he turned his head to look at her, as if to ask a question she had no words to answer. For a long moment, Amelia remained on the cold asphalt, the world silent except for the frantic drumming of her own heart. The German shepherd sat before her, a statue of quiet strength. He didn't move closer, just watched her with eyes that seemed impossibly old and understanding. He let out a soft whine, a gentle puff of air that was less a sound and more a question. That small noise broke the spell. With a shaky breath, Amelia pushed herself up, her limbs aching and her clothes clinging to her like a cold, sticky skin. She expected the dog to bound away, his duty done, but he simply rose to his feet with a graceful economy of motion and waited. She turned and began the walk home, her head bowed, not daring to look back, but she could feel his presence. She could hear the soft, rhythmic patting of his paws on the sidewalk, a steady beat a few paces behind her. He never crowded her, never nudged her for attention. He was simply there, a silent escort through the quiet streets. A strange feeling bloomed in her chest, a confusing mixture of lingering fear and a new fragile sense of security. For the first time in a very long time, she didn't feel completely alone on the walk home. When they reached her small house, a modest blue bungalow with a slightly peeling porch, the dog stopped at the edge of the lawn, as if waiting for an invitation. Amelia hesitated, her hand on the gate latch, and then slowly pushed it open. He followed her up the steps. The front door opened before she reached it. Her father, David, stood in the doorway. He was a tall, lean man, with tired lines etched around his kind eyes and streaks of gray in his dark hair. A mechanic's uniform, stained with the day's grease and labor, hung on his weary frame. His gaze went straight to Amelia, taking in her soaked hair, the dark stains on her hoodie, and the tear tracks on her face. His expression tightened with a familiar, helpless anger. "Ami? What happened?" he asked, his voice low and strained. Then his eyes dropped and widened slightly as he finally saw the enormous dog standing calmly at his daughter's side. He took a half step back, his parental instinct warring with his surprise. Where did he come from?" "He just followed me," Amelia whispered, her voice barely audible. "Dad, he helped me. Madison. She didn't need to finish." David understood. He looked from his daughter's distraught face to the dog. The animal didn't growl or cower. He met David's stare with a calm, steady gaze, then lowered his head and gently nudged Amelia's hand with his nose. It was a gesture of such profound and simple comfort that it made the air leave David's lungs. As a widower, he had dedicated his life to protecting his quiet, sensitive daughter, and every day he felt like he was failing as she withdrew further into her shell. Now, this stray dog had offered her a comfort he couldn't seem to provide. "He can't stay, Ami," David said. But the words lacked conviction. "We don't know anything about him. He could be dangerous." Amelia finally looked up at her father, her hazel eyes pleading. "He's not dangerous. He's good. Please, Dad. Just for tonight?" David looked at the dog again, who had now sat, resting his chin softly on Amelia's sneaker. He saw the unwavering loyalty in the animal's posture. More importantly, he saw a spark of life in his daughter's eyes that had been missing for months. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "All right, just for tonight. He stays on the porch." But tonight became the next day, and then the day after that. The dog, whom Amelia named Shadow, never gave David a reason to regret his decision. He was impossibly well behaved, a quiet presence that filled their small home with a comforting warmth. He would lie on the worn rug at Amelia's feet while she sketched in her notepad for hours, his slow, steady breathing a peaceful rhythm in the quiet room. Amelia started talking again, not just in short answers to her father's questions, but in long, whispered conversations with Shadow, sharing secrets that she had always kept locked inside. Shadow became her anchor. Each morning, he would walk beside her to school, a steadfast companion. He never pulled on the makeshift rope leash David had fashioned. When they reached the big iron gates of the school, he would sit without being told, his ears perked, watching her go. Amelia would look back one last time, and the sight of him waiting there, a silent promise of her safe return, gave her the strength to face the day. The world inside the school was still daunting, but it no longer felt like the entire universe, because she knew her world, her real world of quiet loyalty and unspoken understanding, was waiting for her just outside the gate. The change in Amelia was not loud or dramatic. It was as quiet as the turning of a season, a subtle shift that was almost imperceptible to most. But Madison noticed. She noticed everything. She saw it in the way Amelia's shoulders were no longer permanently hunched, in the way her gaze would lift from the pavement to meet the sky, and most infuriatingly, in the small, private smiles that would sometimes grace her lips when she thought no one was looking. The fear that Madison had so carefully cultivated, the fear that had been her primary source of power and amusement, was evaporating. Amelia was no longer her favorite toy, and it made Madison's blood boil with a cold, sharp resentment. One afternoon, standing by her locker, Madison watched Amelia walk down the hall. Someone bumped into her, and instead of flinching and scurrying away, Amelia simply righted herself, offered a brief nod, and continued on her way. It was a small act of self-possession, but to Madison, it was a declaration of war. Her control was gone, and she decided with a chilling clarity that if she couldn't have Amelia's fear, she would take away the source of her newfound strength. She walked to the principal's office with a purpose that made other students step out of her way. Mr. Thompson, the school principal, was a portly man with a perpetually tired expression, buried in a mountain of paperwork. He looked up, annoyed at the interruption. "What is it, Madison?" Madison's face transformed. The arrogance vanished, replaced by a mask of wide-eyed fear and concern. "Mr. Thompson, I don't want to cause any trouble," she began, her voice trembling just enough to be convincing. "But I'm really worried. It's about that big stray dog that's always hanging around." Mr. Thompson sighed. "The German Shepherd. What about it?" "Well, this morning I saw it. It got aggressive," Madison said, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "It tried to attack a sixth grader, a little kid named Timmy. It cornered him by the bike racks and snarled and snapped at him. He was terrified. I had to yell to scare it off." She delivered the lie with flawless precision, a performance honed by years of practice. The principal's demeanor shifted instantly. The annoyance was replaced by serious concern. An aggressive stray on school grounds was a liability he couldn't ignore. "Are you certain about this, Madison? An attack?" "I saw it with my own eyes, sir," she said, placing a hand over her heart. "I'm just so worried for everyone's safety." That was all it took. Bound by school policy and the weight of potential lawsuits, Mr. Thompson picked up the phone. Madison stood by, a silent, triumphant witness as he reported a potentially dangerous stray dog on school property to county animal control. Later that day, the final bell rang. For Amelia, the sound was a joyful summons. The school day, once an exercise in endurance, was now just the time between seeing Shadow. She packed her sketchbook into her bag, a genuine smile on her face, and practically floated out of the school's front doors, her eyes scanning the familiar spot by the old oak tree. But Shadow wasn't there. In his place stood a large white van with the words "County Animal Control" stenciled on the side in stark blue letters. Two officers in drab uniforms stood beside it, one holding a clipboard, the other a long catch pole. And in the back of the van, visible for just a second through the small grated window, Amelia saw him. She saw a flash of black and tan fur, and a pair of wide, utterly bewildered brown eyes. It was Shadow. Her breath caught in her throat. Her backpack slid from her shoulder and hit the pavement with a dull thud. The world seemed to slow down. The laughing, chattering students around her fading into a distant, muffled roar. Her feet felt like they were encased in cement, refusing to move, refusing to let her run or scream or explain that it was all a mistake. He wasn't a stray. He wasn't dangerous. He was hers. An officer slammed the back door of the van shut. The sound was a metallic crack of finality, a sound that shattered Amelia's heart into 1,000 pieces. The engine rumbled to life. The van pulled away from the curb, and for one last agonizing moment, Shadow's confused eyes met hers through the window before he was gone. Amelia stood frozen on the pavement, a lone, small figure in the empty space where her loyal friend used to wait. The silence he left behind was immense and crushing, a hollow ache that was infinitely worse than any name she had ever been called, any soda ever poured on her head. Her anchor was gone, and she was adrift in a sea of despair more profound than any she had ever known. The silence in the small blue house was a heavy, suffocating thing. That first night, Amelia lay in her bed, staring into the darkness, her ears straining for the soft sigh of shadow settling on the rug at the foot of her bed. But there was nothing. No comforting weight. No gentle breathing. Just a cold, empty space where her friend should have been. The guilt was a physical ache in her chest. She had brought him into her life, and she had failed to protect him. When her father came home from work, she told him everything in a choked, broken whisper. David held his daughter as she cried, his own heart aching with a furious sense of injustice, and he made a silent promise that he would move heaven and earth to fix this. Their journey began the next morning. A desperate descent into a world of automated phone menus and indifferent voices. David sat at the kitchen table with a notepad and a phone book, his grease-stained fingers dialing number after number. Animal shelters, rescue groups, county facilities. The responses were a soul-crushing litany of bureaucratic dead ends. No German Shepherd matching that description has been brought in. If there was no tag, he's processed as a stray. It's hard to track. We have too many animals, sir. We can't check for every person who calls. Days blurred into a single gray expanse of waiting and disappointment. Amelia stopped sketching. Food tasted like cardboard. She would sit by the window, watching the street, a lump of dread in her stomach that grew with every passing car that wasn't a white van bringing Shadow home. The weight of not knowing was unbearable. Was he scared? Was he hungry? Did he think she had abandoned him? On the third day, after dozens of fruitless calls, a weary-sounding clerk at a shelter 50 miles away gave them the first glimmer of hope. "We had a report of an aggressive shepherd from Maple Creek," she said. "He wasn't kept here. Per county protocol for bite risks, he was transferred to the main holding facility in Westport." Westport was in the next county over, a 2-hour drive. Hope, fragile and terrifying, flared in Amelia's chest. They drove in near silence. The landscape a blur outside the window. The Westport County Animal Holding Facility was not a place of hope. It was a sterile, concrete building that smelled of bleach and despair. A chorus of frantic barks echoed from the back. But when a tired-looking employee led them through the kennels, they found Shadow in a cage at the very end of the row, silent. He was lying on the cold concrete floor, unmoving, his proud spirit seemingly extinguished. But as Amelia approached, his head lifted, his ears twitched, then perked up. He struggled to his feet, his tail giving one slow, uncertain wag, then another. He knew her. "Shadow," Amelia whispered, dropping to her knees and pressing her fingers through the chain link. "We're here. We're taking you home." But their hope was immediately crushed against a wall of regulations. The shelter manager, a grim-faced woman with a large clipboard, shook her head. "I'm sorry, but this animal was surrendered by a public institution with a report of aggression. He's on a mandatory 10-day quarantine. After that, given the bite risk designation, he'll be scheduled for euthanasia." The words hit Amelia like a physical blow. He was right there, just feet away, and they couldn't save him. The manager wasn't cruel, just detached. Rules were rules. As they drove home, a storm of tears Amelia had been holding back finally broke. But looking at his daughter's devastation, David's exhaustion hardened into pure resolve. He would not let his daughter's heart be broken like this. Back at home, he dug through an old address book until he found the number he was looking for. "Dr. Evans? It's David Thompson. It's been a long time. I need a favor. A big one." Dr. Evans was a vet from their old neighborhood. A kind, semi-retired man with gentle hands and eyes that had seen a lifetime of devotion between humans and their animals. He listened patiently to David's story and agreed to help without hesitation. The next day, he met them at the Westport facility. He didn't just look at the paperwork. He entered the enclosure with Shadow, speaking to him in a low, calm voice. Running his expert hands over him, he watched the way Shadow instantly leaned into Amelia's touch, the way he responded to her voice with soft whines of recognition. He spent an hour with them, performing a full behavioral assessment. His conclusion was unequivocal. He wrote a detailed professional report on official letterhead, stating that Shadow showed zero signs of aggression and was, in his expert opinion, a gentle, well-tempered dog with a clear, strong bond to the child. His report was the key. It was a formal expert testimony that countered the school's report, giving the shelter the legal justification they needed to release him. The sound of the cage latch clicking open was the most beautiful sound Amelia had ever heard. Shadow walked out slowly, blinked in the light, and then pushed his head into Amelia's chest, letting out a long, shuddering sigh. Amelia wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in his fur, tears of pure relief streaming down her cheeks. David placed his hand on them both, his own eyes wet. They walked out of that place of despair and into the sunlight, a family, bruised but unbroken, finally on the long road home. Shadow's return did more than just fill the silence in the little blue house. It filled the hollow spaces inside Amelia. The fight to get him back, the terrifying possibility of losing him, had forged something new within her, a quiet, unshakable strength. The old fear was still a memory, but it no longer had power over her. She had faced the worst, and had not only survived, but had triumphed. A few days later, she was walking down the crowded school hallway when Madison stepped out from the throng as if by instinct. She gave Amelia's shoulder a light, dismissive shove, an old gesture meant to re-establish the old order. But this time, Amelia didn't stumble or flinch. She stopped, turned, and looked directly into Madison's eyes. Her gaze was not angry or fearful, but calm and steady. "Stop, Madison," she said. Her voice was quiet, yet it cut through the hallway noise with absolute clarity. It wasn't a plea or a threat. It was a statement. A period at the end of a long, painful sentence. Madison froze, her mouth slightly open, a retort dying on her lips. She was prepared for tears or anger, but not for this placid wall of resolve. She saw in Amelia's eyes that the game was over. The rules had changed, and she no longer knew how to play. Without another word, Madison turned and disappeared back into the crowd. The true test, however, came later that week. As Amelia walked home with Shadow padding faithfully at her side, she heard angry, taunting voices from behind the school gymnasium. Curiosity pulled her closer, and she peered around the corner. There, backed against the cold brick wall, was Madison. She was alone, her usual confidence stripped away, her face pale. Surrounding her were 3 older girls, their postures aggressive and their laughter sharp with cruelty. One of them snatched Madison's bag and tossed it to the ground. In that moment, Amelia didn't see her tormentor. She saw a girl who was cornered, helpless, and terrified. She saw the same raw fear in Madison's eyes that she had felt so many times herself, that cold, sinking feeling when you know no one is coming to help you. She realized then that bullies were not monsters born of strength, but people built from their own hidden weaknesses. Fear lived in everyone. Without a second thought, Amelia stepped out from behind the corner. Shadow moved with her, a silent, imposing shadow at her side. He didn't growl, but he stood tall, his gaze fixed on the older girls with an unnerving stillness. "What do you want?" one of the bullies sneered, turning her attention to Amelia. "Leave her alone," Amelia said, her voice as calm and steady as it had been in the hallway. The 3 girls looked from Amelia's unwavering face to the large, silent dog beside her. Something in the pair's quiet solidarity unnerved them. They weren't looking for a complicated fight, just an easy target. With a few muttered insults, they grabbed their things and stalked off, leaving a stunned Madison alone against the wall. Silence hung in the air. Madison stared at Amelia, her expression a mixture of shock, confusion, and something fragile that Amelia had never seen on her face before. Amelia held her gaze for a moment, a silent acknowledgement passing between them, then turned and continued her walk home, Shadow falling back into his steady rhythm beside her. The next day, Amelia was at her locker when she heard a quiet voice behind her. "Amelia." She turned to find Madison standing there looking at the floor. "Listen," Madison began, her voice barely a whisper. "Yesterday, what you did, I don't understand why you helped me. After everything I did to you, I cred, 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 cred." She finally looked up, and Amelia saw that her eyes were red. "The truth is," Madison confessed, the words tumbling out in a rush, "I was jealous. You're such a good artist, and you have this quiet thing about you. You never seem to need anyone. I hated it. And I hated that dog for making you happy. It was stupid and mean, and I am so sorry." The apology was real, raw, and steeped in a shame that was plain to see. Amelia looked at the girl who had caused her so much pain and felt not a shred of triumph, only a quiet wave of empathy. She gave a small, simple nod. "It's okay," she said. It wasn't a magical fix. They didn't walk away from the locker as best friends, but something important had shifted. A bridge of understanding had been built over a chasm of hurt. As Amelia walked out of school that day to greet Shadow, who was waiting faithfully by the gate, she felt a profound sense of peace. The cycle had been broken, not with anger or revenge, but with an unexpected echo of kindness that was far more powerful than any act of cruelty. Sometimes, the deepest loyalty doesn't speak with words, but with a quiet presence that gives us the courage to find the best in ourselves. It reminds us that true strength isn't about never being hurt, but about how we choose to heal and how we find the grace to forgive. Amelia and Shadow's story is a testament to this simple, powerful truth. If tales that explore the incredible bonds that mend our hearts are what you cherish, we invite you to subscribe and become part of our journey forward.